Hey, okay, so next up is our dynamic pop-ups in Maplibre. So we already kind of touched on this, but there's one extra step that is going to let us get the information actually out of the map, when we looked at the dynamic pop-ups with Leaflet, the idea is that we're trying to click the point and get some kind of information that's specific to that point or that feature. So in Leaflet, we did that just by making the bind pop-ups dynamic. But we also had this thing with the GeoJSON where you could click it and get out the name property from the GeoJSON with some special methods when you're making the GeoJSON. So in Maplibre, it doesn't quite work the same. We do stuff on a click event, and then when the click happens, we basically query the map and ask it, hey, what did you find at the point where the user clicked? Was there anything that looks like the kind of shape I want to show a pop-up for? And if so, what's the information in it? So let's look a bit at the code. You see on my map here, I have two shapes. One, when I click, it says big square, and the other says little square. So I'm dynamically making a pop-up based on what I'm clicking. So we have kind of the same pattern that we've seen before here with Maplibre. Make our map, then we create that global pop-up. That's quite important here. Unlike Leaflet, I don't believe that Maplibre will automatically close another pop-up. You can have more than one pop-up open on the map at once without setting some kind of option. So you really want to make sure you have this kind of global pop-up defined. And then we're going to make a GeoJSON. And other than the usual thing, I'm just going to add this name property, just like we did in the example with Leaflet. The name here is going to be big square, and the name here is little square, and we put that inside this properties object on the GeoJSON. So we've seen that before. We're kind of getting used to that. Then inside our map on load, we do this thing. We add the source, we add the layer. You see why I wanted to show this to you right away. This is something we're going to run into all the time. So our layer is a fill type layer, which is the polygon, name for the polygon in Maplibre, and its source is this thing I called polygon, which is the name of the source up there. So that links them together. And this is just has a default, which the default is just to be black. Okay. But we could set, the fill color or fill outline or opacity and that kind of stuff, which we looked at very briefly in the polygon shape. Now here we have the map on click, and we're doing that thing where we pass that second bit of information to it to tell it, hey, if you click, check to see, only do this event if I clicked on something called the polygon layer. So then whenever there's a click event on the map, Maplibre will check to see if that click happened in this polygon layer, and only if it does, then it'll run this function. Okay, and then we have this little event thing. We're going to get back, we're going to look at this event that we get back, and we have this special function that's called query rendered features in Maplibre. It's kind of a complicated name. Basically what it's saying is, like I said, we're querying the map. It's saying, hey, whatever you rendered here, query it and see if there's a shape there, basically. Okay, so we're going to do map.queryRenderedFeatures, and we're going to pass it this point. We're going to look at that in a sec. And then if we get back any features, then we know that it's a feature from this specific layer because we only clicked on this case. And we know that we know that we can open the pop-up. So we do the pop-up, we set the longitude and latitude, and we set the HTML. And here you can see I get the properties name. Okay, so that's the rough overview. Let's actually look at it in action. Okay, so when let's reload this and let's click on one of these. Okay. So what we get here in the console is first we get that event, right? So the first thing I have here is I'm console logging the E. So it detected that I clicked on the polygon layer, and now it's going to tell me what is E. So E, you can see here, has a long lat. It also has a point, which is like an X and Y value, and then it has some other stuff. So the long and lat is kind of useful. We used that when we were creating our pop-up that was telling us the long and lat of a spot that was clicked. And this point is something that is more internal. Internally, you don't really use this aside from how we're going to use it here, which is just passing it into a function. And this just tells us basically the X and Y value. So how many pixels to the right and how many pixels from the top did we click, which isn't really important to us at all, but it is important to Mapbox because this query rendered features function, which we can look at by going to the documentation here, it shows properties of hovered over or of clicked over mouse elements or whatever. So when we click on this and see a bit more, it tells us what it's about, and it takes a point-like bit of information. So we don't really need to know. There's a lot of other details that we can pass to it, but the core here is just that we have to pass this e dot point. It doesn't take the e dot lat long or the long lat. It'll get confused. It won't work. So we do map.queryRenderedFeatures e dot point. Now, what do we get back when we query that? First of all, it's features, not feature. So I'm going to get back an array is one of the first things to note. So I click on this. I guess I already was console logging this. So this thing, yeah, right, I already console logged what we actually get back, which is the same thing as I'm console logging here. And you can see it's an array, and the array has a feature in it, which looks kind of like a GeoJSON. It's kind of a little bit weird. Here's the geometry, right? So the geometry is there, the coordinates, and here's the properties. So we also get this layer here, which tells us like the layer that this thing is part of, right? We created that layer. And then there's this other crazy thing, vector tile feature, that you don't need to care about. But it looks kind of like a GeoJSON. It just has some extra junk in it. So since we get that, we know we can get at this big square thing. We can get at it by going .properties.name on this feature. So in the code, I have to check, first of all, did anything come back? Because maybe it comes back empty, you know? It wouldn't happen in this case because we're making sure of something, but it's a good thing to just check. Oh, is the length more than 0? Is there more than one? Is there more than 0 things in this array? If there are, then set the long lat. And here I use the event.longlat because since it's a polygon, there's not a point, right? Like I can't just tell it, oh, open at the point of the marker, because there's no point. I'd have to find either the center of this polygon, but a good practice is just opening right at the user's click. So you can see it changes depending where I click, which feels natural. So I set the long lat to the event.longlat, so where the user clicked. And then I set the HTML using this, again, there's that syntax again with the weird quotation mark and the $ and stuff. And then I say features 0, so the first element in the array, .properties.name. And we know that's what I was getting from here. I was picking the first item in the array, which is this item here, .properties.name. And that's going to get us what we need. So that allows us to show big square or little square. So let's say you had a bunch of other information in your GeoJSON. You had something about the color it should be, or some numbers, or just like a different header or whatever. You can now do things conditionally, what we call dynamically, based on what is clicked. And you don't have to do it like creating individual pop-ups for every single one. You can just make kind of a rule like this, that no matter what, we're going to show the name in this special thing. This is really common for real estate maps. You know, you need to show the address of a property. Well, you can just put .address if you included the address in your GeoJSON. So hopefully that's clear. And now we're going to move on to one more thing before we do like a whole little example project, because with all this stuff in hand, we're pretty much ready to start tackling real maps. See you in the next one.